Warning, incoming game over. Warning, incoming game over.
Hello everyone, welcome back to Game Over Ottawa. Maude here once again, and today I'm joined by Adam Coplan from the Zubcast. How are you doing tonight, Adam?
Well, about as good as I can be after whatever we just watched. That's the fourth straight loss for our Sens. Just another typical month of November, I guess, so far.
Yeah, unfortunately, a fourth straight loss. And for me, covering the Sens on the show here today, I got 2 wins in the first 2 games that I covered, but now I've done 5 straight post-game shows with just a
Oh, man.
brutal loss. And for whatever reason, the Sens never score until the third period in these games that I cover. So it's getting rough, but it seems at this point that it's just a typical November for the Sens as they fall tonight 3-2 to the Vegas Golden Knights. And it's not the most surprising result ever, considering that they've only got 2 wins in their entire history against Vegas. I had a little bit of optimism because they did beat Vegas on home ice last year. It didn't work out here tonight.
No, Vegas just absolutely owns the Sens. It's a bit outrageous. And I feel like, so when I was recording a Zubcast a few weeks ago, I was doing a trivia segment, and one of my questions had to do with what the Sens record had been against certain teams over the course of the rebuild, so over the course of the last 7 years. And then when I was doing research and looking up, their records against all the teams, I get to, the East is like, it is what it is. And I get to the West and they are just putrid against some of these West teams. Like Vegas, you can be like, okay, at least Vegas is good. I believe the Sens, you can correct me someone can correct me if I'm wrong. I think the Sens are 1-11 against Chicago
Oh
in the
my
last 7
God.
years. Which is like, that's hard to
Yeah,
believe.
with
And
with both teams rebuilding at the same time, and the Sens supposed to be like ahead of Chicago in their
yeah,
rebuild too.
yeah, that's a bit troubling. But yeah, I mean, they just, boy, oh boy, like it's almost like I call it almost like a scheduled loss. Like whenever they play Vegas at home, like I think they said it on the TSN broadcast. Like I think the Sens have beat Vegas once at home, and it was in a shootout, so it barely even counts really. So it's just, they kind of just Vegas comes in, storms the building, and it's no chance. So another typical Sens loss to Vegas at home. I guess what can you do?
Yeah, the official numbers are 2-10-2 against Vegas
There you go.
for the Sens in their franchise history so far, which, like, obviously we've been rebuilding that whole time, but you'd think that you would get a couple of lucky ones here and there, but no puck luck for the Sens tonight as they end up losing a tight 1-goal game. And yeah, it's tough too because earlier in the season when we played Vegas in Vegas, it was actually a really good performance from the Sens, but they didn't even get a point out of that one. They let it slip away late. And they pointed out on the broadcast, I didn't realize it was this bad at this point, but since that last loss to Vegas, it's 4 wins in the last 14 games. You can make that 15 games now
Yeah,
after the loss
that's tough.
tonight.
That's
So
tough.
it was, I think the Sens record was 4-2 when they played Vegas the first time, and it's fallen to 8-10-1. So you can pretty much call this a spiral at this point, eh?
Yes, I mean, good times, a 4-2. That feels like an
Yeah,
eternity
I miss
ago.
it. Oh my God.
That's like, oh, I don't know. What can you even say? Like, you're right. I would certainly consider it a spiral, and I think it's tough because, like I don't think. I mean, we can talk about this game. We'll talk about this game obviously specifically as we go on, but just in general, I don't think they've been bad. I would not say that the Sens have been like playing poorly for the majority of this spiral just in terms of losses, but it's always little just stupid mistakes at unfortunate times, a severe lack of consistent goaltending, which was not the issue tonight. We'll get into that later. But it just feels like they can never have everything clicking at the same time during a game. Like there's always like one little thing that's off, and then as soon as it's off, it just kind of like sets everything in motion for a loss. Like they just can't come back from it. Which I think is, as a team like the Sens, where you're not guaranteed a playoff spot every year, like some of these other teams like Florida and Toronto, where you can kind of just sleep your way into the playoffs. You have to be resilient when things don't go your way. And one thing that has been, like sickeningly common in the last 7 years is their inability to respond to adversity and be resilient. And I think we're seeing that again, again at the start of this year. But I mean, Yeah, what can you even say? It's pretty exhausting.
Yeah, the inability to respond to adversity has been like one of our most frequent topics on this show, I feel like, and we saw it here tonight with the constant like response goals. I think Vegas it was exactly 2 minutes after the Sens made it what was it, 2-1 at that point when Dorofeyev scored the 3-1 goal. And it was it's just lots of plays tonight where one thing goes wrong and then the next few minutes of play for the Sens are just terrible. Like I think it was after the 2-0 goal, the next 5 minutes after that was just the Sens being completely hemmed in their own zone, just barely being able to chip the puck out of the zone and then having to go for a line change. Like that was probably the worst stretch of the game there, and it came after that 2-0 goal. So it's like whenever one thing goes poorly for the Sens, even if they don't, even if it doesn't totally sink them for the whole game, it seems like they'll always have a rough stretch of play right after that, and that makes it hard to win games.
Well, I think that, using the second period as an example, I think is smart because I mean I was watching the TSN broadcast as I'm sure everyone else was, and they show a stat at the beginning of like the second period. I think they're 6 minutes into the second period, and it's like Vegas does not have a shot in the last 7 minutes.
Oh yeah.
And you're like, this is great. Like they're coming out like everyone at the first intermission, they're like they got to come out flying here. Like they didn't play an awful first. I thought they played an okay first. I didn't think they looked terrible. I would have liked to see them get off to a better start, but they were totally in the game after the first period. You have to get off to a good start, and they did. No shots for 7 minutes. Then one thing goes wrong. You let in the second goal, which was not a very good goal on Armour. It was a bad line change, but it's not a great goal. And then they just like the rest of the period's a write-off. Like they just completely collapse. And then, there was the stat 7 minutes without a shot for Vegas. And then later in the period, they show, no shots in 6 minutes for the Sens.
Yep.
Like it's just, that's kind of like a microcosm of the season at that point.
Yeah, any good stretch of play is just immediately followed by something that undoes it. And it's the same over the course of like multiple games, because anytime that the Sens play like 2 good games in a row, it's always like 2 steps forward and then like 3 steps back right after. Like, because I think it was we were like 8-7-1. We had a pretty good stretch of play there, and then now we're 2 games below 500. Just the inability to actually string wins together, and then now it's piling up into losing streaks as well. So I'm not gonna say that the season is totally in the toilet yet. Like last time I was on after the Carolina game, I tried to come on here and be as positive as I possibly could. The 5-on-5 numbers for the Sens overall for the whole season in terms of advanced analytics are still really good. They weren't so great probably. They've probably taken a dip after the Edmonton game and tonight, because a lot of shots allowed tonight too. But it's going to be harder going forward to remain positive if the Sens can't turn it around, I think. But the way I want to angle it for the rest of this first segment here is I want to talk about the goaltending matchup that we had tonight, because it was an interesting storyline coming into the game where there was a bit of social media beef between Linus Ullmark and Ilya Samsonov in the summer, although we could maybe call this a bit of a one-sided beef, because I don't think Ullmark ever acknowledged it or anything. But Ullmark was on a podcast in the summer where he said that he was surprised that the Leafs stuck with Samsonov for as long as they did in the playoffs last year. And obviously, Samsonov ended up playing the Game 7 of that series, and the Bruins took it. So Samsonov did not take kindly to that. He responded to a post about Linus Ullmark being ranked the number 10 goalie in the NHL, which this is the funny part, is it wasn't even like a clip of Ullmark saying that in the podcast. He just went on another random post about Ullmark and decided to be salty about him. And he said November 21st, keep your ass shut, or are you injured again? He was not injured again. He was healthy for this matchup, Ullmark was. But Ilya Samsonov gets the last laugh after this one, and that is now 2 losses to the Vegas Golden Knights for Linus Ullmark so far this season. What did you think of Ullmark's performance overall? Because to me, I think the bar is kind of low, but that was honestly like one of his best games of the season, maybe.
He was, I said it before, he is not the reason they lost. I think a lot of people will rightfully complain about the second goal, because I mean, that can't really go in. I remember when that happened in the second period, it's not a fair comparison, but because they're not the same, and Ullmark is a far better goalie, but that was so Korpisalo-esque. Like, he's made a lot of great saves up to that point, and he's kind of kept the team in it, and then he lets in, it's such a softie. I mean, you can't really let that in like through the armpit like that. That's a real backbreaker. Like I said, that's a poor. I mean, that chance should not have happened in the first place. That's a poor line change. By I think Ridley Gregg was part of it and Shane Pinto was part of it. They just kind of left the D out to dry. That's kind of where you want your $8 million goalie to bail you out a little bit. But I mean, Vegas scored 3 times. They could have easily scored 6 or 7 tonight. At the end of the day, it didn't matter because the Sens only scored twice. Ullmark was fine. I was totally all right with his game. I was a bit concerned just the way he's been playing. I mean, I feel like there have been a number. I could probably 3 or 4 games this year that the Sens could have won with better goaltending, because I think the Sens in general have actually, like I said, they've been playing pretty well. But I thought, the result aside, I thought this was a good response game from Linus Ullmark to kind of quiet everyone down. I think he'll end up giving up 3 goals on over 30 shots. It's above a 900. That's all you can ask for from your goalie every game. It's to just get above a 900. And honestly, letting in 3 goals, you're hoping that your team can help you out, especially when you have as much so-called firepower as the Sens have. I mean, you can count on Stützle, Tkachuk for a couple goals, like Batherson. Like, they have a lot of options. Samsonov was great tonight.
Yeah.
Which was hilarious because he had an 890 last year and he was kind of awful. But I mean, just to touch on that beef with Ullmark, I find absolutely hysterical because it's like we're talking about Linus Ullmark here. Like, this is like the nicest guy. Like,
yeah,
he's like
it's
the most
weird to pick a fight with such a nice guy.
He's like a stoic, like, I don't care, I'm gonna go about my business. He says like one pretty inconsequential thing on a podcast. Like, I don't think there was any like ill intent in what he was saying. I know, I mean, maybe Samsonov was salty obviously because he lost, but I mean, he was fantastic tonight. Just like Ullmark could have, or the Sens, sorry, could have given up a few more if not for Ullmark. I thought the Sens had a lot of great opportunities on Samsonov tonight. And he really stood on his head, and he made some clutch saves at the end there when the Sens were really pushing in the third. But yeah, I mean, in terms of Ullmark's performance, I was happy. Can't ask for much more than that from your goalie.
Yeah, I think you're bang on in that it was 3 goals against, but over 30 shots. That's basically above average at this point. I remember reading that the league average save percentage is way down this season. I don't remember the exact number, but it was like somewhere between like 902 and 905, somewhere around that. Maybe it was 906. But regardless, if your goalie can give you that and like 3 goals or less, that's pretty good, especially like you said, with the Sens supposedly being a high-powered offensive team, although it hasn't felt like it in the past few games. And you were also right that the Vegas Golden Knights really could have scored, like, honestly, it could have been 5-0 by the end of the second period. Like I said earlier, with that stretch after the 2-0 goal, they just had chance after chance. There was one that went right through the crease. It looked like the Vegas player was going to have a tap in, and I couldn't believe that it went in. We never got a replay of that on the broadcast, I don't think. But so I don't know if that was a save by Ullmark or what, but that honestly could have been a much worse score heading into the third period. So I do have to give Linus Ullmark credit tonight. I think he gave the Sens a chance to win this game, despite that second goal being pretty rough. It's not one that you'd like to see go in against the run of play, and it's not like the most dangerous shot ever. But I mean, again, at that point, only 2-0 into the third period, he gave his team a chance, and they did get close. If it wasn't for that one defensive mistake in the third period, the Sens did dominate the third period, and it could have been an overtime game at least. Obviously, we didn't get that, but I think in terms of Ullmark, like, I have to give him credit tonight. If he plays that way for the coming weeks, I think the Sens have a much better chance at turning this around. Like, he's been really hot and cold. It'll be like the worst game you've ever seen and then the best game you've ever seen. I think he had a lot of highlight reel saves tonight. So, I think I got to give him credit. But unfortunately, he loses the goalie matchup to Samsonov, which is a tough one.
Yeah, I mean, Ullmark's been a bit funny to start the year. I mean, obviously the injury probably doesn't help. It probably puts his rhythm off a little bit earlier in the year. But I mean, by my count, like, okay, so he starts the home opener, right, against Florida. And I would call that maybe a stolen game. Like, they didn't play great. They were getting outworked. They were getting outmatched by Florida, a better team. And Ullmark gave 100% gave him a chance to win, and they won. And then at that point, everyone's like, this, like, he's the guy. Like, that we found the guy. He's unbelievable. And then from that point on, he had the shutout in Toronto. I wouldn't say that he had to work very hard for that shutout. Like, I wouldn't call that a stolen game. I would call that you kind of almost expect that. Like, he did his job. He did his job in that game, and they won. But besides that Florida game, I can't say he's stolen a game for them. Which, you can call me picky, but I'd kind of want my $8 million goalie to steal a couple more games.
For sure.
But yeah, like, he's had a tough start, and I'm not worried about Linus Ullmark, and I think a lot of other people would say the same thing. I mean, this is a 5-year commitment that you've just made to this goalie, who's, track record in large. He's got a Vezina. I mean, I think he'll be fine. But I think it's important that they give him a string of starts now. Like, I think unless there is a back-to-back coming up, you should just run him. I don't think there's any reason to not let him try to get into a rhythm. Like, you're talking about, like, how do you turn this around now? Because, I mean, let's not lose sight of the big picture. The Atlantic sucks, and the East as a whole also kind of sucks. So the Sens are, like you said, they're 2 games under 500. They're like, what, like 4 points out of a playoff spot?
They're
Like,
not out of it yet.
No, it's completely meaningless. So you have to be, as much as it sucks to say this, because this is not what the fans deserve, you have to be patient, and you have to let Ullmark get into a groove and start a lot. Like, he's got to start again when they play Vancouver on Saturday, and then he's got to start again when they play Calgary on Monday. And then, you evaluate after those 2 games, and you really hope, for everyone's sake, that he puts in 2 more performances like he did tonight, because I think that's going to give a lot of people more peace of mind, and I would bet on the Sens winning at least one of those games if they get another performance like that from Ullmark. But yeah, big picture, this was a very promising game from him in the long term. Like, he needed a response game, because he honestly, like, he threw it away. I was at that Philly game.
Yeah.
It was jarring.
That Philly game was the most angry I've been after a loss in, like, years, I swear.
Man.
Like,
yeah, that was bad.
So would have been great if the Sens could have gotten a point here tonight, at least, to steal the game where or at least steal a point out of a game where they may not necessarily have deserved the win. Unfortunately, they haven't been able to do that. But yeah, if Ullmark keeps playing the way that he was tonight, I think that's trending upward, and I think he's going to be giving the Sens more chances to actually get points out of games where they're maybe not necessarily, like, the better team by far,
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. Like, we're not, obviously you want to win every night, but you're not in a win-driven league, you're in a point-driven league. Like, you need to get points in the standings. So that's why, I mean, you talked about that game in Vegas earlier this year. That's one that's like, you need to get a point out of that game.
At least one.
You need to get progress in the standings out of that game. Because from what I remember, they were up 5-4 or whatever, and they had to kill a penalty. And I wasn't watching that game, I had work, but I saw the score. I saw the score as that was happening. I'm like, okay, they're going to give up a power play goal. That's fine. And they're like, take a point. All you have to do is take a point in Vegas. That's a tough building to play in. We know the Sens don't play very well in that building. They had a great game from Adam Gaudette. Like, everyone was, like, firing. You have, like, that. Those are games you have to get a point out of. And I would put this as another one of those games, which is kind of unfortunate, because they made a good push.
Yeah, with how that third period played out, I don't know what the final shots were, but with a few minutes left, it was like 16-4 shots for the Sens at that point. And they did get 2 goals when they were down 2. It's just that they gave up one more. The way that third period played out, that is a game that I feel like you got to get at least 1 point from, right? Especially with how the Sens never tie the game with the goalie pulled. Which is...
It's one of the most strange anomalies I've ever seen. Like, I don't understand it, because we were talking about this, like, like off stream, but, like, we thought this was a DJ problem.
Yeah.
And it's not, because they couldn't do it under Jacques, and they seem, I mean, it's early returns, but it doesn't look great under Travis Green. Like, they're lacking, like, a clutch gene or something. Like, it's just really, really strange that, because they get, they set up, like, just talking about this specific 6-on-5, they set up in the zone, and the shots that they take is like Giroux from the outside, Chabot from the outside, Giroux from, like, the corner. And I'm like, what are you, like, what is the goal? Like, these are not shots with a purpose. These are shots with, like, what, like, we know we can't really do this. Like, we're just gonna fling it on net,
hoping for
like,
a lucky deflection, basically.
Exactly. So yeah, that's really unfortunate. But just in terms of, they had a great third period, 100%. But you don't have to count on a great third period if you start a little bit better at home. This is the second game in a row where a a Pacific Division team is coming in on the second half of a back-to-back in a different time zone than they're used to, and they start stronger than the. It doesn't even make any sense.
With
like,
both
they
of those
start...
teams being shut out the night before too.
Yeah, true. I mean, like the Habs and Leafs aren't doing us any favors by making them pissed off, like, coming into Ottawa. Like, that's for sure. But I mean, that's not an excuse. Like, you have to be ready to like go and like dominate that team. Like, you have to look at that strength, like at that schedule that you're coming into and being like, that's an opportunity to run all over them. That's another, like, in the next game, that's another opportunity to run all over them. And they didn't really, like I said, like, their start wasn't bad. Like, they didn't throw the game away in the first period. They let in a tough goal, which was not Ullmark's fault. It was shocking defending. I mean, I know we're going to talk about the defense in a bit, but I don't know. I'd like to see a more purposeful, energetic start by the Sens, like really take it to them in the first 5 minutes.
Yeah, that's a great point too, because as we mentioned about the third period, you could tell that Vegas was getting tired at that point. But again, when a team has played the night before, you really should be bringing it to them right away. Obviously, they're not going to be as tired at the beginning of the game as they are at the end. But like, when playing the night before, they're probably, at like 80% compared to 100%.
Yeah,
and
you have the energy advantage.
The Sens, who have been sitting on home ice, they're on a home stand, they haven't been traveling at all, they should have the advantage in that situation. So yeah, I agree that we'd like to see them get off to better starts in this scenario, and just in general too, because I feel like early in the year, most of their best games was where they had a really good first period and they were able to just hold the lead for pretty much the whole game. So when the Sens don't score first, they don't win this year.
That's shocking. That was a shocking stat on the broadcast.
Yeah, it's
today.
it's 1-9-1 now when giving up the first goal. So that about says it all, right, in terms of how important a good start is.
It's not a playoff team if you're doing that.
Yeah.
Like, we talked about it, like facing adversity and responding to being down in the game. It's almost like you're, as a Sens fan, it's like second nature to assume when they go down 2 goals, the game is just over. Like, you have no chance of coming back. Yeah, that sucks. Like, but it sucks because it's true. Like, the numbers literally prove that it's true.
We have the stats to back it up.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know how do you, I mean, I'm not a genius. I don't know how you fix that problem. You have, I mean, the easy answer is you get off to a better start and you score first, but it's not realistic to say you're going to score first every single game. You're going to come into these games, especially like hard, gritty, close to playoff games. You're not going to score first every time, and you can't just fold after that.
Yeah.
Like, if anything, you should be amping up your game and not crumbling back a little bit in order to try to change the tides. I'm hoping that this is kind of like a long-term effect thing with Travis Green, because I'm sure that the culture that just of perennial losing that was under DJ has seeped in pretty deep, and there was probably a lot of like give up attitude, especially in those like the ugly rebuild years, like the 2018, the 2019, like where it was just like you're barely even trying to win the game. And that probably, I mean, I'm not an NHL player. I don't know what that feels like mentally, but I can assume that that's probably going to take a while to get that out of your system. This would have been a good game to really show the fans, like, we're getting it out of our system.
Yeah.
And, like you said, like they come back in the third and they make it a fight, and that's great. But, unless you have points to show for it, I don't think it's going to go a long way with the fans.
Exactly. Yeah. You bring up a great point about the long rebuild and lots of losing over that time. The core is probably just used to losing at this point, and not that they accept it, but it's hard to get out of that. So I think that's going to be a major thing that Travis Green and the coaching staff have to fix, and they'll have to fix it quickly, because when you fall behind 1-0 in a game, your record should not be that bad. They cannot let that record continue to be so bad for the rest of the season. But from there, we're going to throw it into our second segment. Before we do that, though, just a quick ad read for Hyperdrive Hockey. Check out the flagship show of Game Over Network on the Game Over Network YouTube channel. Hyperdrive Hockey, all things hockey across various leagues in multiple countries. Whatever it is and wherever it is, Max, Daphne, and Kev have you covered for all your hockey news with a steady dose of fun and fan engagement. You can find Hyperdrive Hockey on the @Game Over Network YouTube channel, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts on the Hyperdrive Hockey page at thegameovernetwork.com. All right, so for the second segment here today, I'm going to hit that buzzer sound effect. I wanted to throw it to the offense now because we talked a lot about the goaltending, but the offense is pretty much, I would say, the main reason why we lost this game. You give up 3, yeah, but we definitely could have scored 3, I think, with the chances that we got here tonight. And the way I want to frame this is a little funny because the goaltenders that the Sens have been facing lately have mostly been struggling before they played the Sens, and sometimes after they played the Sens too. I'm going to pull up some stats here. Spencer Martin, who got the shutout against the Sens, his first start a week before that, first start of the season, was 5 goals against on 28 shots against Colorado, 821 save percentage. Then he played again tonight against New Jersey, and he allowed 4 goals on 21 shots for an 810 save percentage, but he shut out the Senators. And then Stuart Skinner, on November 9th, 3 goals against on 20 shots, 850 save percentage. Then 3 goals against the next game, 22 shots, 864. 4 goals against on 22 shots, 818. And then he played the Senators and got a 931 save percentage. He's currently playing against Minnesota right now, so we'll see how that plays out. He might end up having a good game, maybe not. And then it continues to Samsonov as well, because Samsonov's last 3 games before playing the Sens, he had an 885, a 778 with 6 goals allowed, and then an 833 with 4 goals allowed on 24 shots. But then, once again, he plays the Sens, and he has a great game. I feel like I'm taking crazy pills when I see this because it just seems that no matter how poorly a goalie is doing before they play the Sens, they're going to have good stats, regardless of whether or not they like totally steal the game. Because like Martin and Skinner, the Sens didn't play super great in those games. Their teams definitely deserve the win, regardless of the goaltending. But you'd think that we would at least be able to score on Martin, you know, and score more than 2 goals on Samsonov when we get 40 shots. So like, what is it about the Sens and just making opposition goaltenders look good, even if they're not? That's my question for you.
Yeah, doesn't it feel like they've been doing this for years too?
It
Like,
does.
it's not this is not a new thing. Like the Sens have kind of been like, they've kind of gotten this reputation as the slump buster team. If you're struggling, like come into the CTC, like light them up, or your goalie gets a shutout or something. I don't know. It's a good question. I don't have an answer for why they're so bad at that. I think so much of this, though, like I was talking about it earlier, like I think so much of it is just mental. Like I think it comes down to like just so much losing, like it so much losing, and that runs really deep. And you know, I think when the Sens start a season, and we've seen this probably the last 3 or 4 years, when the Sens start a season, vibes are honestly usually pretty high, and they usually always win their or like they play a good home opener. They win their home opener. Everyone's feeling good. They'll start like 3-1 or 3-2, then 4-2, and then they have a bad game. This year, I mean, they lost that was a bad game against Montreal, the second game of the year. And then they went out west. They had a bad game against Colorado, and then the bad game against Vegas. And it keeps coming back to it, but they can't figure out how to get it back on track. And I think a lot of that really kind of shoots your confidence when you come in with really exciting expectations on how this year is going to be different. Something goes wrong for you. You can't get it back on track. Now here comes the team with a goalie who's been terrible. And oh god, like we're about to lose to this guy. Like it's almost like almost brewing in your head.
You can see it coming, and then the prophecy fulfills itself every time.
Yeah, but it's even more puzzling when you look at a game like they played against the Rangers, which I still believe was their best game of the year, and they lose, but they completely dominate who is probably what most would consensus consider a top 5 or top 3 team in the league, in the New York Rangers, and they play unbelievable. They go into MSG, tough building to play in, against an excellent team, dominate, get goalied, they lose. And when they get these like limping, like sick teams coming in with not much going for them, I really don't understand the mental block that they can't get across with that. Like it's almost like that's an added pressure that they don't need, where it's like, oh, you better win. Like this is a great opportunity for you to win. It's almost like they're not seeing it as a great opportunity to win. They're saying, "Oh God, like this is a heck of a chance for us to kind of like lose a tough one here. Like it's gonna keep getting downhill." So I don't know. I maybe they need a sports psychologist in the room, man.
Yeah.
I have no idea. That's a tough go for them.
It's a weird dichotomy where it feels like when you don't expect the Sens to win, did they actually play a really good
Yeah.
game? And then when you look at the lineup that's coming in for the opponent and like the streak that they're on, like coming off those teams coming off of shutouts, then you're like, oh, this is a good opportunity for a win here. This could be beneficial, and then it's just never turns out that
Yeah.
way. It seems like
Yeah.
so.
Same thing with Philly. Like I don't even think you mentioned the Flyers goaltender
Oh
that was
yeah,
coming
I
in.
was going to. I remembered it after. I'm glad you mentioned it too.
I mean, that was like he had like what, like an 860 coming
Yeah,
into the game.
he
And I mean
had.
they scored 4 times on him, so it's not like they got shut out or anything. But they lose. They lose
Yeah,
that game to a
they.
goalie that's not very good and to a team that I think is like below the Habs right now in the East. Like
Mhm.
that is a game you need to take 2 points out of, and they kind of threw it away. Obviously, we talked about how Allmark didn't have a great game. But I mean that probably contributes to a lack of confidence as well. He couldn't even beat the Flyers a couple of days ago.
Yeah, like that's another example where even though they did score 4 goals, they kind of got goalied in that game because it was like 40 shots to 15 or whatever it ended up being. And I guess they kind of goalied themselves with how Olmark played, but that's also a game where you would hope that with all that pressure you would be able to put the game away sooner and
Yeah,
absolutely bury your opponent, where I think it was only like 2-0 halfway through the game, or
yeah,
like it was low scoring for a while until it really popped off in the third period. So
yeah. They
it's
had they had multiple 2-goal leads. That should
mhm,
be enough to win. I mean, you
yeah.
can talk about putting them away, and you're totally right about that. But I mean, up 2 goals against the Flyers. We're talking about the Flyers here. Like that is enough, in my opinion, to win the game.
Yeah, but in terms of making these goalies look good, that it's tough because I would say like you brought up the Rangers game where obviously that was just completely stolen by Shesterkin.
Yeah,
Um, but a lot of these other games, especially the last 3 where I mentioned the stats of those goalies, it's just like I wouldn't say that the goalies stole any of those games. It was mostly just the Sens making them look good. I think.
yeah,
I think even though we have this really good like shots percentage on 5-on-5 for the Corsi, a lot of our shots are just like cheap dump-ins, just throwing it on net off the
yeah.
rush with no support, just like one guy going in while everyone else is on a line change and just shooting it from a bad angle. I feel like we kind of pad the stats for these goalies too, and
Yeah.
the biggest problem for me is that the Sens' chances are always one and done. I feel like
Yes.
whenever we do get one good chance, especially at 5-on-5, we are almost never getting the rebound. We're never winning the puck back before the other team can clear it out of the zone. And I think that's one of the biggest issues for me is that, yeah, we run up the shots by throwing it in a lot, but we never get second and third chances, it feels like.
Yeah, 100% agree. And there was a couple instances where Vegas was, really hemming the Sens in. And you could kind of see like they cycle the puck around. They look for they don't just shoot. They look for a grade A opportunity in the slot to shoot, or they got bodies at the net, make a quick pass. Allmark will make a save. They miss the net, and then they're right in there to retrieve the puck and they send it back.
Yeah.
You're 100% right. I think at the end of the third period there was some sustained pressure going on from Ottawa, but yeah, I mean the Corsi numbers are great, but it doesn't matter if you can't finish. I think that's the point that you're making. And I mean, we can talk about specific players. Like David Perron doesn't have a goal yet, and
He
I
should
know
have had one
he
tonight.
should have
Like,
2 tonight. And
tough,
and I know he's
tough.
missed. Yeah, very tough. I know he's missed a lot of time. And I know he's been dealing with some really tough stuff. So I don't want to harp on him or anything. But he had some great looks tonight. You got to finish one of those, man.
Hmm.
Like you got to finish. It's easy to say it's a great save by the goalie, but put it, put it a little higher, like wait the extra second. Um, in terms of the offense, though, I thought, I don't know, I thought Stützle was flying again tonight. I thought he had an excellent game. He has been fantastic to start the year. He has not been the problem on offense. Um, I thought there were a couple. I don't know, a couple. I don't want to say passengers because I think everyone was somewhat engaged in the game, but people that I'd like to see more out of in that kind of clutch, we need a goal scenario. Like Adam Gaudette scoring on the power play. That's great. I'm not really counting on Adam Gaudette
Yeah,
to bring us
it
back
shouldn't
into the
be up to
game.
him, you know?
Yeah, 100%. I know Batherson had a goal, which is huge. I didn't think he generated a lot throughout the game. I say the same thing about Norris. I would say the same thing about Ridley Gregg, who had, by the way, a disgusting pass on the Adam
Yeah.
Gaudette goal. Credit where it's due, disgusting pass. But I know that they were talking in the intermission about moving him down from the top 6. I agree with that. I don't think he's a top 6 player. We're talking about really Greg. Like, this is
He wasn't
a player.
expected to be one like
No,
this season
no.
coming into it.
I think a lot of it was kind of like I think he's developed a lot faster than they thought he was going to, which is great. But it's almost made them thrust him into a higher role than what he's capable of. And I think if Ridley Gregg is on your third line, that's a damn good third line. And I think you could elevate. I know they were talking about elevating Perron. I don't love that idea. I'd rather elevate Shane Pinto to the second line because that I think is a player with the most offensive potential that can complement whoever's going to play on. Like I know they mixed the top 6 up a little bit, but yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to harp on the forwards because again, I don't think they played that bad. I just think they're kind of lacking this killer instinct finish where they can kind of get in and you know, maybe some of the entries aren't very clean, which is something to work on, but you know, eventually you got to start burying these chances that you're getting. You can't just keep chalking it up to getting goalied every time.
Exactly. I think it's sort of a case of just they get their shots, but they don't necessarily finish. And I wonder if at the start of the season, obviously we had the insane power play heater that has now come back down to reality, even though they did get a power play goal here tonight.
They needed it badly tonight, that power play
I'm
goal.
thinking that their shooting percentage was probably completely jacked in those first 10 games too, and it's got to be falling back to reality at this point as well. So it's a little bit of it is just regressing to the mean in terms of offense, but at a certain point you'd think that we're better than this. It's like we went way above what we should have had for like expected goals, scoring way more than expected, and now we're way below, scoring way less than we're expected. So it's tough because you just want to see them meet in the middle and just like actually score the chances that they should, right? It's a tough case to crack. And I think I'm glad you brought up that what they were saying about Ridley Gregg at the intermission was that they have him in the top 6, but it wasn't really the plan for him. And I think Bruce Garrioch mentioned that Steve Staios is kind of shopping around to see if he can add a forward. I think that's an interesting idea, but it's probably like not going to be great options out there on the trade market like at this time of year, right? Like that's the type of thing.
Exactly.
That's the type of player where you would hope to add someone into your top 6 or top 9 like at the trade deadline when you're already doing well. If you're trying to get a player like that in November, it's probably going to be a tough price to pay, or it's going to be a player that's not necessarily a bona fide top 6 guy or like someone who's more fringe. And like Garrioch mentioned talking to Nashville and Pittsburgh because they're off to really bad starts, but like who the hell would you even want from either of those teams? Like I'm thinking that is pretty much no one that would interest me. So
I don't think you're getting Crosby.
Yeah, it's a tough one there for sure with the offense. Like I wouldn't mind them moving David Perron up the lineup just because I think he's been buzzing lately and he's been getting his chances. Maybe playing with someone like Stützle could help him out to finally score a goal. But also when we're talking about the best option to elevate up the lineup is a guy with 0 points on the year, that's not exactly ideal.
That's the thing. I mean, before I get into that, like you talked about the shooting percentage, they scored 8 goals twice in October.
Yeah, that inflates it for sure.
That was never going to be sustainable. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think that they signed David Perron with the intention of him playing in the top 6. I would kind of hope that they didn't, because David Perron is a fine player. I have not been upset with his play at all this year. You're right. He's been buzzing. He's been around the puck a lot, and he's getting his looks, which is the most important. Like he's not a no-show out there. And it's the same thing. Like I know people were criticizing Amadio a little bit earlier in the year, and he's got some goals now, so I guess that's kind of drawn back. But he's just like, he's the type of player where if you don't notice him, it's not the end of the world because he makes these like little smart, like good plays in the neutral zone all the time. Like he just moves things forward and he's a great facilitator. But that's also not like, do you want him in your top 6? Like not really. Like I feel like the one of the problems with the Sens is they have a lot of third liners, like a lot of really good third liners.
Yeah, guys in the middle.
Which is good for, it's good for depth. Because I think this is also the best fourth line that they've had in a long time, which has kind of fallen off since they had a great start. But anyway, the problem with having a lot of good third liners is some of them are going to have to play on the second line, and that might create some complications in terms of generating offense. But that's why, I don't know. I still think you should play your best players as high in the lineup as they can. Like Shane Pinto is a top 6 best forward on the team. It's not even close.
I have to say that Pinto not being on power play for any of the 3 power plays tonight did
Very
bother me.
strange.
I don't
Yeah.
know, like they got Perron in there and he had some looks. I think that was the
Yeah.
swap, is that Pinto's usually in the bumper role on power play
Yes.
too. They had Perron in
Yes.
that spot, but I'm like, don't take Pinto off entirely. Like, I don't know, try him on the first unit. The first unit
Yeah.
hasn't been good lately, so like
No.
switch
I
it
mean, the
up
second
a
unit's been
little
way
bit.
better.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I love that they have Gaudette on power play too. Like he is like he's the most unique fourth liner that you can have in the league almost pretty much. Like he's so skilled. Like let's say like Claude Giroux got injured, I would plug Gaudette on that
Oh yeah.
line
Yeah.
and he would probably do fine. But having him as an option as like a true power play specialist fourth liner is a really, really good thing to have. And it also doesn't hurt that the fourth line is not just there to get caved in and hopefully not get scored on. Like you can actually run up the ice and do something with the puck. So that's turned out to be a great signing for them, and he's been good in the power play. Shane Pinto should absolutely be in his bumper spot. That worked really well for them last year and even the year before, like when he was playing. Like they had this great little play that they used to do where it would be like Chabot or Sanderson at the point, down to Brady behind the net, and then Brady would pop it right back up to Shane Pinto, who's like in the slot bumper spot. And he would just shoot, and it would be a great look. Sometimes it'd be a goal. I don't know why you would get away from that. Like that's a good look that you can have, and he's got a quick release, a good shot. He's smart, and he's a smart player. Like you want a smart player in the bumper. You want him kind of, facilitating where the puck is going, and how the movement is going to look in the O-zone. Like I don't know. I still feel like I don't know David Perron that much, like as a player. Like I feel like I've barely seen him. He doesn't strike me as like a true power play guy, just the way he plays. Once again, like he strikes me as like a good contributing, hardworking third liner who can get looks.
Solid
Like,
two-way forward.
Yeah, like do you want that kind of player on your power play? I'd say it's not super ideal. But yeah, I mean the power play's been struggling. It was a big to get that goal, but I mean the point is they still, like, on the year their power play's still excellent. Like it's not, they're not near the bottom half. Like I think they're still in the top 10. So I'm not yet ready to call the power play a problem. But you're right. I totally agree with you. I found it very strange that Shane Pinto was not in his usual spot there tonight.
Yeah, that's one thing I'd like to see not last super long, or if they can shake it up a little bit. The other thing that's weird to me about the power play too is the fact that Brady Tkachuk is never in front of the net anymore. Like,
Yeah,
I
why?
know that he has pretty good playmaking ability, but like you need him
does everyone
screening
else.
goalies, and you need
Yeah.
him going for deflections. Like you said, so does everyone else. Almost all of the guys that you throw out there on the power play for the Sens have really good playmaking. That's basically like what it is it's like 5 playmakers out there, and hopefully they can pull off like a tap in,
Yeah.
instead of like a shooter just shooting it. Like we used to have Norris taking those one-timers, but we don't really have a designated guy for that anymore. So yeah, the other thing, it doesn't quite work with how I was saying they should put Pinto back in the bumper role, but I also would like to see Tkachuk in front of the net too on the power play.
Totally agree. And I think another underrated or underappreciated part of having him in front of the net is not only is he great at tipping pucks and boxing out, but Brady Tkachuk's best skill set, in my opinion, is along the wall. And so whenever you are at the point with the puck on the power play and you want to send it down low, he can pop from in front of the net right behind.
Yeah.
He can take that pass. He can kind of body off whoever's on him, because he's Brady Tkachuk. Like he's gonna body him off. And then you now have that option. If you're ever in kind of like an emergency or a tight spot, you have that bailout play where you can just send it behind the net. Brady pops behind and tries to make a play with it, that can be huge for saving some zone time on the power play. And yeah, like, don't try to galaxy brain it. He's your best net front player on the team. Like when you have a power play, which is the best opportunity to score at any given moment, you want to put your players in the spots that are most suited to their skill set. And yeah, just like, why would you overthink it? Like he's so good down there. I 100% agree. I don't know. Like who were they playing in front of the net
I
tonight?
think it was
anyway?
Norris, and we
That's
didn't
not-
see
so not his
Yeah,
spot.
we didn't really see any plays make it to him to shoot in that bumper spot. So
Yeah.
it's weird. Just like flip those two. At the very least,
Yeah.
if they're not going to change who's on the first unit, I need to see those two flipped and get Norris back on that one-timer side.
Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah, so that's how we're feeling about the offense. Only 4 goals in the last 3 games for the Sens now. I think a little bit of tinkering is probably on the menu going forward here. Before we head into our third segment, just another quick ad read. Game Over Network is an independent production focused on community, inclusion, and quality people. If you're interested in supporting the Game Over Network, we have crowdfunding options available. In the description of this episode, you'll find a link to our Patreon page with multiple tiers available, and we're also working on a page through LaRouche, a crowdfunding platform for companies originating in Quebec. For LaRouche, we're aiming to raise $15,000, and if we hit that goal, we'll gain access to government grants that will allow us to employ more people. If you have any ideas for what you'd like to see as giveaways for these crowdfunding efforts, let us know in the comments or Twitter, Instagram, or even our Discord server, which we have the links to join on our website. If you're interested in joining a hockey-focused Discord, we have that available as well. Now, into our third period, I wanted to talk a little bit about the defense as well. I think this probably won't be as big of a topic as the scoring and the goaltending tonight, but one thing that's been bothering me with the Sens lately is the Sanderson-Zub pairing has just not been up to snuff of what it was last season. So I pulled some stats. Last season, they were obviously our best defense pairing. Everyone knows that. Corsi for percentage, 53.67, obviously best on the team. And in terms of expected goals for, 51.1 percentage with over 800 minutes of ice time with that pairing. So they played together a lot and it was frequently good. The actual goals scored for that pairing, they were only a +3. It was 38 goals for, 35 goals against. But if you flip it to this year, I'm not sure. Sanderson did get an even strength point tonight, but it was funny enough not with Zub. I think that was Sanderson and Chabot on together. But basically, those stats have all flipped this season with the Sanderson-Zub pairing. 48.69 Corsi for percentage and 48.1 percentage for expected goal share. In 111 minutes. So it's not the biggest sample size, but I think it's getting to the point where it's starting to be a little bit worrying. And the actual goals for and against for that pairing is 1 goal scored and 6 against while they're on the ice. With Sanderson and Hamonic, it was 1 goal for and 7 goals against. And all of that results in Sanderson being a -13. So we were blaming Travis Hamonic for Sanderson's struggles for so long, and now I'm saying, was that even true? It was probably a part of it, but I'm like, the Sanderson-Zub pairing is just not up to snuff of what it was last year, and it's kind of mind-boggling.
It's really puzzling to me. I do think I still think there's validity to that argument. Like, Zub is a better player in every aspect of the game than Hamonic is, and in theory should complement Sanderson to a much greater extent. And he did last year. Like, you just said all the stats. Like, it was, and we could all see it. It was right in front of us. When I look at Sanderson this year, there was a play in the third period tonight where the Sens, they were down 1 or 2, and it was getting into the later stages, and Jake Sanderson has an opportunity to go for a skate. They're on a change. He's got it in the D zone. No one is in front of him. And he skates like he used to do this last year, right? Like, he would be like a one-man breakout. And he skates right up into the neutral zone. And then he cuts back, like he does a circle back into his own zone. And I said, that Jake Sanderson did not do that last year. Like, last year, Jake Sanderson takes on whoever's in front of him. Maybe he does a little chip in charge, or he looks for a bumper play, but he kind of just peeled back. And I think he's playing a little bit timidly right now.
Yeah, less confidence, it seems.
Definitely less confidence. And I think a lot of that does have to do with I'm sure he knows he's not contributing at 5-on-5, and I'm sure he knows that he's a -13. I know plus minus is kind of a, it's not everyone's favorite stat, and it's not a super useful stat, but it doesn't look good when you're -13.
It gets to a point where it's a reasonable thing to bring up when because we're only through what is this? It's said in the thumbnail. This is, I think, the 19th game, and you're -13 in 19 games.
It's not great.
No, not at all. So there's a certain point where it does become something to look at.
And again, that pairing with Zub. Zub he's missed a lot of time this year. Like, he had a tough injury. He's coming back from that. It's funny though, because I wouldn't say that they have been bad. I think that's an over-exaggeration for people to say that they have been bad. I think we were very used to seeing Jake Sanderson be like spectacular, and
Yeah.
Zub is like so solid, and they have been, and that, you know, that should be the expectation, because they've made it clear that they can do that on a consistent basis. But this is not like, you know, this is not like they're getting caved. Like, I haven't felt like they've gotten super caved, and I haven't felt like it's been like completely atrocious defending. I think a lot of it is I think they need to see something go in. Like, I think that's big that he got an assist on 5-on-5. Like, I know it's a nothing assist. Like, it's a secondary assist. But I don't know. It would help them to get a game where they're a plus. They need to end a game as a plus, as a pair. And I think that once the team, like, it's also a byproduct of the team. If they can win a game, everybody feels better about themselves, and everybody starts to play with a little bit more confidence and feel a little bit better. The pair, I mean, I can spin this into a positive. One of the other reasons that we're not seeing Zub and Sanderson in such a good light is because Chabot and Jensen is the best pair on the team.
That's
right
true as well. That's where I was going to take it next.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that Chychrun trade, no one, like, let's be honest, like, no one loved that trade.
I was mad. I was mad when I saw
Yeah,
that tweet
sure.
pop up. I was like, what the hell is this? But Jensen has been great. Jensen has been considerably better than, like, over this 20-game stretch, he's been better than Chychrun was for any 20-game stretch for the Sens.
100%. And he has been, in the offseason, I talked a lot with Louis and Josh on the Zubcast about, you know, what do we want from the Sens in the off? Like, what do they need? And we all agree that they need another Zub. Like, they need another type, like, Zub type player. And Jensen has been unbelievably stable back there. He is really reliable. And he, you know, he does more than Zub in the sense that he can actually jump up and make a play. Like, we saw it. I still remember the shift in the Utah game where, like, Jensen is like flying all over the ice. Like, he breaks up a 2-on-1. And then he like races the puck up the ice on the right side. He makes like a little dangle, and then he like passes it across. And they, like, I'm like, what? Who is this? Like, who am I watching right now? So Nick Jensen's been fantastic. And I think when this is the first time that Thomas Chabot has had a partner that is self-sufficient in a really long time. Thomas Chabot does not have to carry that pair. I would even say that Nick Jensen is to an extent carrying that pair right now. And Chabot's been great, but this allows Chabot to flourish so much more because he doesn't have to worry about what's going on the other side of the ice. And in the D zone, he can just take care of it. Like, let's be honest, like, Thomas Chabot is not, we don't think of him as a defense first player.
Yeah, he's the puck mover.
He's the puck mover. But when Nick Jensen can like take care of his side of the ice, he knows he doesn't really have to worry about that. Thomas Chabot can just do his thing. And then the breakout, they're both like beautiful breakout defensemen. Like, whoever's got it on either side, I'm pretty confident that's going to be a good first pass. But yeah, like, Jensen has been such a great bright spot. And like, just getting back to that trade, like, I know that, you know, like, a lot of people like yourself, like, we're angry at that trade. Like, how is this the value that you're recuperating for Chychrun, who you just traded whatever it was, like a first and a second and someone else for? Like, that's just bad asset management. I don't want to say that they won that trade, because I think, first of all, it's too early to say that. Washington is unbelievably good this year, and Chychrun he's got a lot of points. But the Sens made, in a sense, a lateral move where, like, a Chychrun style defenseman they have in Chabot, and he plays the same side. So it's kind of like a useless player to have there at that point. Like, you already have that. Why wouldn't you give that player a partner? Like, you can even out your sides now, and you get your D sorted. And I think they were also counting on Zub and Sanderson being as good as they were, which
for
is fair.
Sure.
And you know, again, I'm still not worried about that pair. Like, I know and if you are worried, I can understand. Like, that's pretty valid, just based on what we've seen. But I don't know. Like, we've seen 2 excellent years of Jake Sanderson in his career so far. Like, really almost without blemishes. Yeah. And it doesn't make, like, I just refuse to believe that he's just with the same partner that he's been good with. He's just lost it. I don't think that's true.
So, that's the thing, is it's a greater sample size over the course of 2 seasons of Sanderson being fantastic compared to just this little stretch of some struggles, right? So you are right that it's more likely that he's going to bounce back, especially the Sanderson and Zub pairing as a whole. And yeah, to cap off this conversation, I was gonna come on here and say, oh, we need to be playing Chabot and Jensen as the first pair, give Sanderson and Zub a little bit less ice time, and they actually did do that tonight. And to do a bit of stats pulling again, with Sanderson and Zub taking sort of the secondary pairing matchups, they actually got like 68% Corsi 4 percentage for the two of them, and Chabot and Jensen playing like 2, 3, 4 minutes more because Chabot had more ice time than Jensen.
Yep.
They did Sanderson Chabot together in the third period. Those guys actually had the worst performance in terms of the run of play. So I don't know. They did do that. They did lower the ice time for Sanderson and Zub, and it was actually a better performance in terms of the advanced analytics. So maybe we could be onto something here. It kind of seems like whoever we put as the first pairing is just going to have worse stats. But I mean, that's when you're playing against the best players, right?
Yeah, it's a tough match. You get the tough matchups. And in terms of, I still believe, like, who do I want dealing with the tough matchups? I want Sanderson and Zub. Because I just think like having that punch of, you get, because I'll reiterate it, like I still think that that's an elite defensive pair, and once you can get those guys to deal with the other team's top lines, then you roll out Chabot Jensen to just like go and go for a skate, like go get some zone time. I still think that's the right way to do it. I don't think that you're maximizing the player's specific abilities when you're matching a Chabot Jensen pair as a defensive unit against the top guys.
That makes sense.
I don't think that's the best way to use it. And then you'll have, I mean, we know Sanderson's a great offensive player, and Zub, not really. Like, it's not like he's inept offensively, but he's just, you don't think of him that way. I don't want them feasting. Like, Sanderson is a great power play quarterback, and he's really, really good with the puck at the point on 5-on-5. But I think that the Chabot Jensen pairing brings a lot more creativity and offense in the O-zone, and I would want them on the weaker matchups.
That's a good point.
But yeah, I mean, it's something that they could experiment with going forward. I mean, we haven't even touched on the third pair, which was kind of a disaster.
To be honest, I don't even want to get into that tonight. Like, we basically, with that at this point, we know that Travis Hamonick's going to be back in next game.
Yeah,
it's just certainly, like, already a certainty. So yeah, unfortunate. The only thing I'll say on that is it's unfortunate that it took JBD so long to get back into the lineup. I think he sat for 5 or 6 games. But when you sit a guy for that long, like, he's probably not really going to be fresh when he comes back in. So I kind of feel bad for him. I think that they should be rotating him and Hamonick more often is all I'm going to say on that, I think.
Yeah, they had a tough game, man. Like, that first goal was a rough look.
Yeah, they're both standing around covering no one.
They're standing around covering no one, looking at the net.
Yeah.
Like, there's a guy right behind them who is uncovered, and they're not even looking that way. Like, Clevin is in the crease. I guess he's trying to play goalie because Allmark was kind of out. I don't know. I didn't love Clevin's game. He took a board. Like, I love that. Clevin should be using his physicality. That's 100% one of his best attributes. And for what it's worth, I think Clevin's been good this year. Like, for the most part.
Yeah.
He took that was 100% a boarding penalty. I don't really understand how the instigator works in the NHL, but that's a topic for another day, I guess. But I thought and I mean, that third goal is a bad pinch because he does not have the foot speed to come back, and he knows it. So if
and
he gets
no one
caught,
covered for him too.
No one covered. 100% true. No one covered for him, and that's not necessarily on him. But you have to have the presence of mind as the D man. If you're going up, you got to be sure someone's coming back, and you have to be able to make it back with your foot speed. And that is why. I mean, that's the game-winning goal, right? Like, that's kind of on him in a way on why they lost. JBD didn't have as bad of a game, but it's just like that pair, you have to kind of chalk that up to that's a rough game for that pair.
Definitely. Yeah, the way you mentioned that they were both just staring at the net on that first goal, I almost wonder if they just like assumed that Vegas had scored and that like they didn't expect Allmark to make the save there at all, and they were just looking at the net waiting for the play to stop, waiting to see the red light on, and then they didn't see it, and then they were like, oh shit, didn't have enough time to react. So yeah, tough night for the third pairing. Good night for Sanderson overall, which is good to see because I brought this into the game wondering how the Sanderson and Zub pair was going to do as they've struggled lately. But to be honest, not bad. Hopefully they start to trend up pretty soon. From there, going to throw it into our final ad read of the night, which is for our merch. I'm going to get the QR code up on the screen, and unfortunately, I'm going to have to cover your face for a moment here, Adam, as we play a slideshow of the Game Over merch. What better way to support something you love than by rocking it as clothing? Game Over's apparel line has dropped with 3 unique designs. Whether you feel the nostalgic pull of our retro skater design, if you want to make a statement with our established design currently on sale, or if you want to wear your love for goalies proudly with our live or die by the goalie design, or if you just want another coffee to get you through the winter, we have you covered. Designed by Brady Chalice from Game Over Winnipeg, use the QR code on stream now and take a look through our apparel store and help us rebuild local sports media in Canada while repping your community. There we have it. There we have it. So, into our last segment here is going to be taking a look at a few comments from the chat. Probably won't spend too long on it because we're over the hour mark now, but a quick one. Ty Smith pointed out that Jacob Chychrun is playing for a contract. I do want to point that as well as the whole situation with Jacob Chychrun's contract. That's going to be like, with the amount of points that he puts up, that's probably going to be over like $6 million for his contract, right? So that's obviously something that wasn't going to work for the Sens cap situation going forward. So that's a good point by Ty in the chat there. Also, Michael in the chat coming in saying, time to trade Brady. We have enough proof that it's not the coaches, but the core players are the problem. Brady is still too immature to be the leader, and it's rubbing way too much on the other players. Now, I won't go so far as to say trade Brady yet, especially because there still is a chance at maybe turning the season around, but there is something to be said about the immaturity. I think it was after the Oilers lost, and Brady himself said that the team is still too immature overall. He used that word specifically. And it's another loss here tonight. You do have to wonder about that aspect. It's hard to question the leadership of your captain when he's just been on a losing team and it's not really his fault for his whole career as captain, because he's been one of our best players constantly, and it's really the surrounding pieces around him, right, that have made it difficult to get wins. So I don't think I can question his leadership yet, but you do have to wonder. We were talking in the first segment today about how this team really struggles to overcome any adversity, whether it be throughout the whole schedule on the season or within games with certain moments. I don't know where I'm heading with this, but just to throw to you in terms of like Brady's leadership, what do you see? What do you think?
Well, I mean, to comment on that, on the comment from the chat, like, I don't think it's outrageous to at least consider the possibility of trading a core player.
Yeah.
Like, you're getting to that point now. Like, we're on, like, this is year 8, guys. Like, we can't do this forever. I'm not on the trade Brady train. I'm not there yet. I don't think he's the problem. In terms of leadership, like, he gets after it every game. I've never seen Brady take a night off. And, you can say what you want about he has to kind of draw his team into the battle as well. And I guess that's easier said than done. But I just look at, like, I don't know. He's such a unique unicorn player where if you trade him, first of all, you're losing that trade. It doesn't matter who you get back. Like, that's a sunk cost. And then you have to replace that huge hole in your lineup.
That's the thing. Like we can question leadership from Brady all we want, but if you trade him, who's taking over as the leadership, right?
Exactly.
Like, there's not really anyone else behind him other than Giroux, and if you're trading Brady, you're probably also trading Giroux,
Yeah.
So
yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't trade Brady. I mean, but I mean, like, I agree with the comment in the sense of, like, we have to look at the options here now.
Yeah,
like,
definitely.
Nothing's off the table.
I think it's fair to say that no one is untouchable at this point. Like, obviously, Tkachuk, Stützle, Sanderson are as close as you can get to untouchable, but it's at the point where if the team still keeps losing, you have to consider all options, and like any phone calls that come to you from any GMs, you might as well talk to them because you never know. But yeah, in terms of trading Kachuk specifically, I think that's the management is going to be really reluctant to do that, mainly because we saw what happened when his brother got traded from Calgary.
Yeah,
Like
that's scar
he
tissue.
returned a boatload of assets for the Flames, but the Flames were not a better team after making that trade, and the
No.
Panthers certainly were. We saw how well that played. So giving a Kachuk player a change of scenery could very much benefit them, but historically it won't necessarily benefit the team that's actually trading him away. So I think they would be a little bit apprehensive just because of that. Like, you would get a haul for Brady, but the only way
Yeah.
I would ever do it is if he himself demanded a trade. Like, if the
Yeah,
losing
agreed.
gets so bad that he demands a trade, I wouldn't blame him.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's you don't do it until you absolutely have to. I think there is something to be said for, I guess, trading a player before they're at their lowest value. Sometimes when a player demands a trade, then people say like, oh well, they have to get rid of them, they're not going to get anything back now. But I think with a guy like Brady, you go as long as you can to try to make it work, right?
Yeah, and I mean, like, he says it publicly all the time. Like, I want to win here. And I don't think he's lying. Like, I know players like to play the media and all that, but like, I think he's in it for the long haul, man. Like, I don't think Brady is demanding a trade. I'd be really, really surprised. And another thing, like, so let's say that you trade Brady. It's not going to be a 1-for-1 trade. You can't really do that. So chances are it's going to look like the Carlson trade, which I know worked out really well. Or like, I don't mean the exact trade, but it's going to be a conglomeration of picks and maybe not prospects, but roster players. And I know that the Carlson trade ended up working out quite well for the Sens, but that's not really a strategy that you can bank on frequently. Like, I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
trade this star player for a bag of goodies and hope that some of them hit.
Yeah,
And
especially
you're like,
because like the Carlson trade, you couldn't have predicted San Jose's fall off to get a
no,
Stützle with that draft pick. If you
not at
make
all.
another trade like that, it's unlikely that the team you're trading with is going to have that big of a fall off again.
Yeah, I agree. So I don't think it's in their best interest to trade Brady. And honestly, if they were thinking of doing that, I don't think that's a mid-season decision. Like, that's going to be like, what I will say is, if the Sens, crash and burn this year, someone in the offseason, a core player is getting traded. I can almost
Yeah.
guarantee that would happen. I don't think it's going to be Brady, but I think they would consider it. And I think you're more likely to see like a Norris move. A Stützle I don't think is going anywhere. He's the most skilled player on the team. And like I said, he's still like, he's not even he's 22. 22 years old. Like, that would be a major mistake. But I think you would be looking at trading Batherson, trading a Norris. I think you'd look at Shabbat if you
Yeah.
can trade the contract, but I think that's a summer conversation.
Yeah, I agree. And Isaac in the chat also saying we fired the GM, fired the coach, and brought in support players. If the Sens can't get it done this year, you got to look at that core. I think
Agreed.
that's right. If
Yep.
if we don't get anywhere this year, then you start to consider it. But I agree with you, Adam, that it's more likely to be a guy like Norris or Batherson. In terms of if you want a locker room shakeup, Norris and Kachuk are best friends. Not saying that you need to split them up, and that's why
Yeah.
that's a problem or anything. But maybe that could be, instead of going to trade Kachuk first, maybe try trading Norris for a shakeup first
Yeah.
instead. Just
Exactly.
maybe. I don't know. Like, if we're gonna shake up the core, I think of what you would want is I remember back, it's probably like almost 10 years ago now, but when Columbus traded Ryan Johansson for Seth Jones,
Yeah.
that type of a trade is what you would want ideally, where it's a guy who's on the come up as like a young top six forward and a guy who's on the come up as a young top 4D. It was and they both kind of needed a change of scenery, and that ended up working out well for both teams. I
Mhm.
think if we are to shake up a core, you would want to look for something like that, where another team has higher expectations that they haven't met, maybe you can do a shakeup. Like, I don't know, if Buffalo misses the playoffs again, maybe we can
Yeah.
do a swap with one of their young core players, something like that. Or like, obviously Nashville's off to a rough start. There are teams that you can make deals with, but I think ideally you would want to look for that like 1-for-1 type thing.
Yeah. Buffalo's funny because, I mean, you'd be just trading a loser for a loser.
Yeah,
So I don't
yeah.
know what that
and then
accomplishes.
and then hope that it would finally work out. I don't know.
Yeah. But I mean, that comment, I think, brings up a really important point, which is the players now have no shield.
Yeah.
This is, and everybody knows it. It's 100% on them. And if they can't get it done they're gonna have to answer for that, probably in the form of one or more of them moving. And that's why I was like, coming into this season, I didn't put I used to the 2 years previous, I'd be like, Sens are playoff team. I think they're gonna make the playoffs. And this year I didn't do that. I was like,
Yeah.
I want the Sens to impress me. Like, I want to be pleasantly surprised by what I see, because I'm expecting the same thing, because I've not seen anything else. And nothing to sway my opinion. And up to this point, I can't say that I'm super impressed. Like, I'm not certainly not pleasantly surprised at 8, 10, and 1, or whatever they are. But I mean, you have to look at this bigger picture. If they win 3 games in a row, they're in the playoffs.
Yeah, it's true. They just need to figure out how to do it. They need to figure out how to win more than 2 in a row. That's the biggest thing.
Yeah, but it can turn on a dime, man. We've seen it. Like, they just lost 4 straight. Before that, they were feeling all right. Like, they were above 500. Everyone was like, this is great. Like, Detroit sucks, Boston sucks, Buffalo sucks. Like, we're gonna do it. So I don't know. Like, all you can do is just hope that they can pull it together. And a lot of it is like the mental stuff we were talking about. But I'm not gonna say I'm confident that they'll do it. But it's up. Like, they have the ability and the power and the opportunity to surprise people, and I hope that they do it.
I think that's a good note to end things off here tonight. Yeah, in terms of this game and the 4-game losing streak, I am feeling very negative about the team, but I'm also trying to remain positive. I think you put it in a good way, that if they can actually get on a winning streak, which they have trouble doing, if they can do it, they do still have a chance, because the East and the Atlantic Division is one big, like, just glut of teams all being within a point or 2 of each other. Like, Boston fired their coach while 1 game below 500, and they were still 3rd in the division at that point. So it's like it's there for the taking if this team can get their shit together, basically. So hopefully we can get some of that, and it's going to have to start, if it's going to happen, it's going to have to start next game against Vancouver, where we will be having a Game Over crossover episode with the Game Over Vancouver crew. I believe it will be Damian Smith hosting that night. It will be on our channel since it's a home game for the Sens, and I think Kaya from Game Over Vancouver will be joining. So look forward to that as our next show. Thank you so much for joining me tonight, Adam. It was a fun episode.
Yep, that was awesome. I wish we could have talked about a win, but you got to switch something up. I know you were saying that you were getting unlucky with the ones that you were hosting, so maybe change the routine next time to get the Sens a win.
It's brutal at this point. I'm 2-5, and the first 2 games were the wins. So
yeah, that's rough.
It's a tough one. So
yeah.
Hopefully the Sens can turn it around. Thank you everyone so much for watching or listening. If you enjoyed, leave a like on the video, share this to your friends, and have a good night.